I'm going to tell you something. If you two ever bother me again the rest of my life, I ain't giving up that shit. I can't. There's good friends of mine out on the say. Well, he's divorced, you have to do his stuff. That's why I said to you before, you don't understand what the money. The most of me is that the boss is your boss.
And welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I am your host, Jeff Canarsie. If you are new to this channel, do me a favor, hit like, subscribe, and always share our content. As you guys can see, the title of the show is Gravano is Caught Lying. But before I get into the show, I just want to promote one thing. If I can actually find it, which doesn't appear. Okay, so Saturday night at 9 o'clock, every Saturday, beginning this Saturday from 9 to 11 p.m., we are doing a brand new podcast on YouTube Live called The Diner. Here's the promo. We are looking forward to doing this podcast. This is going to be something different than you guys are used to me doing. And there is really nothing like what we're going to do. It's a bit of everything and a bit of nothing at the same time. So please, if you guys have a couple of minutes Saturday night, please come out YouTube Live and join us. I think it's going to be a really fun show. We're going to have a good time. There's going to be lots of surprises, a lot of games, but not for this first episode. It's going to be more dialogue driven for the first episode, but some funny stuff and some good stuff along the way. And as always, it is going to be a safe place, meaning anonymity is a big thing. And we are going to allow people to be anonymous. What we're not going to allow is the trolls and all that kind of nonsense. So if you want to come on the show and you don't want to show your face, we're okay with that. I would prefer you do. But if you choose not to, we certainly understand, because we want it to be a place where everybody can come and hang out, and there's none of this bullshit that goes on YouTube. All right. So that being said, if you guys have time, you like the content, please go ahead and donate to us if you can. Our Cash App is down there. Hit the thanks button, super sticker, whatever it is you guys want to do. I would appreciate it. We told you that 2025 was going to be different, and it is. So we're going to get started with today's show. And like I said, the title is not really misleading, but it is to an extent, because a lot of what comes out of Sammythebull's mouth, at least nowadays, discounting the past, is bullshit. A lot of what he says is lie filled. And today I was actually working on my podcast for the week over on the paid format, which is www.supercast.com/Mob Talk Radio Show. You can find us there. It's $10 a month, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I was working on something for that. And usually when I'm working, I have Instagram in the background and or YouTube videos or reels, and I'm just, scrolling up, listening while I'm sort of working on what I'm working on. And I came across 2 Sammy Gravano videos, which made me sick to my stomach, because I don't listen to the guy. I never really do, but maybe I should, because he's really starting to tell some big lies. But then I was listening and something caught my attention very specifically. I'm not going to play his his videos on this show. I don't believe in playing other content to make content. I believe in content should be original. But one of the couple of the things that he said didn't make sense to me. And I did read his book, The Underboss, when it came out, and I remembered certain things that he said there. And he's telling legitimately 20 different stories about the same event. So today's show is, if I can do this the right way, is Gravano didn't kill Johnny Simone. And it's another lie. And there's more lies that he's told that are bigger than this. And so I'm going to bring up another one because this is really what we're going to be talking about today. All right, there we go. And I'll go ahead and just let me see if I can. All right, so this is what the show is going to be about today. Obviously, you have Bobby Manna on the left. You got Paul Castellano sort of in the middle. You have Johnny Simone on the far right. And the guy next to Bobby Manna is a guy by the name of Nick Russo. And that is going to be the crux of what we're talking about today, because Gravano has lied about certain events. And once I started kind of looking a little further into the documents that I have, I says, I caught him in a big one. So that is what we are going to talk about today. And we're going to jump right into it. Now, a bit of a disclaimer. Nothing that I'm saying here, with the exception of a few limited things, can I prove with documents, okay? Basically, I'm using his words versus what he said in his book versus what I have in court documents and what the history has told us. Some of this is my own interpretation. Some of it, like I said, is backed up by documents, testimony, and more. So I'm going to make, I don't want to say leaps because that's the wrong word. I'm going to make some opinion-based statements, which can't really, they can be refuted by people that have a difference of opinion, but the documents that I have support 99% of what I'm going to tell you. So we're going to jump right in. So let me pose a question. Do you guys and gals, because we have girls in the genre too, do you know how you can tell when Gravano's lying? When he breathes. For decades, all this guy has done is inflate, deflect, and blame everybody else for his problems. And two of the biggest lies that he has told, because I could pick one of 10 to go off of, but the two we're going to really focus in today is the murder of Johnny Simone and Frank Stilitano. The problem is Gravano is selling you a story about both of these men, both Johnny Simone, who was a captain in the Philadelphia Mafia, and Frankie Stilitano, who was a Gambino-made guy working and operating outside of Trenton. And what nobody has ever discussed, at least I looked around today, I couldn't find anything about it. So if there's a video out there that I'm unaware of, then I apologize. But nobody has ever discussed the fact that he lied about these two things. Instead, what you often find is people buy into his nonsense, hook, line, and sinker. And Gravano would have you also believe that he was a millionaire by 1980. And that's 3 years after he was inducted into the mafia. And it's total nonsense because Gravano was really persona non grata until John Gotti took over the Gambino crime family. And that's just the truth. So in 1979, just before Angelo Bruno gets killed, there was trouble brewing in Trenton, New Jersey. Now, Trenton has long had different factions working there, but it's always sort of been typically a Gambino wing in New Jersey that operates in Trenton. And it wasn't always like that, but that's just the way it's been for a couple of decades. Trenton at the time was controlled by Gambino captain Nick Russo, and had been for a long time. This is a guy that had a lot of prestige, a lot of power. He was a serious guy. But what happens in 1979 is that Frankie Stilitano murders mob captain Nicky Russo's son, Michael. And the true issue is that Frankie and Michael had gotten into a verbal altercation at a restaurant by the name of Trianfetti's. And the argument was based on who was going to provide for the family of a recently incarcerated gambler and bookie. Words get exchanged, which leads to more words outside, which leads to obviously a physical altercation. Michael, who's enraged, calls his father about the problem. And at 2 a.m., Michael and his father are leaving a restaurant. And as soon as they hit the pavement, bullets get sprayed everywhere. That shooter of that event was Frankie Stilitano. Unfortunately, Michael Russo is killed instantly, and his father, Nick, survives, but refuses medical attention. Now, this is where it gets interesting. According to Salvatore Gravano, in 1981, this is all 1981 here. Gravano, in his book, said that he murdered Stilitano for retribution on Nicky Russo's behalf for Stilitano killing Nicky's son, Michael. Basically an eye for an eye type of stuff. However, in the book, he just can't really remember the names of the people associated with this either. So it's in his book, he mentions people by the wrong names, and then all of a sudden, he just doesn't seem to remember anything. But he remembers it when he's on YouTube. Let me tell you, as well, according to Sammy Gravano, the murder had nothing to do with the issues that were going on down in Philadelphia after the murder of Angelo Bruno. Gravano, in his book, explained, and this is another thing, he explains in his book that the beef was Stilitano thinking he could absorb Russo's rackets. And that was not this issue at all. That never even happened that way. It's a total lie, because other informants who were at the scene of that physical altercation that night told the FBI what actually had happened. Gravano, in his book, is basically inventing something that never fucking happened. And he's almost trying to give himself a reason for being involved in a murder. He's trying to justify his reason for being involved in that. The problem is, you don't need a reason to. A capo's son is killed by another made guy, and the guy in question that did the shooting is going to get killed. Those are the facts. That's what the street dictates. And Gravano, in his book, is making this out to be a more complicated and serious beef than it truly was. And don't get me wrong, a murder of somebody's a horrible goddamn thing. It's a horrible fucking thing. But the reality is he's trying to make it into something more. So after this shooting, according to Gravano, Nicky Russo comes to see him with a request. Gravano explains that Russo asks him to go and sit down with Paul Castellano, the boss of the Gambinos, and get permission for him to kill Stilitano in retaliation. Now, see, here is what Gravano doesn't tell you. Russo was insanely respected, and he did work for the Gambinos in 1980 by killing Johnny Simone. Yep, you heard it here first. He is the one that was behind that move as a favor to the Gambino crime family. Do you really think they're going to hand a murder to a fucking soldier, to a nobody in that life? But we'll get a little deeper. So Gravano had nothing to do with Johnny Keys, but we'll come back to that. So according to Sammy Gravano, he goes and he sits down with Paul Castellano up at his mansion at Top Hill. And he tells Paul what the request is. Now, according to Gravano, Paul at first says, nope, I don't want to give permission for this. But then he relents and he tells Sammy to go to Nick Russo and explain to him that the Gambinos will handle it and that Sammy is going to be directly responsible for pulling it off. Now, there's several problems with that statement. Sorry, I have nose running. Number one, in 1980, Gravano was a nobody. He was just another fucking run-of-the-mill soldier. Do you really think, just use your street acumen for 1 second, ladies and gentlemen, please, because even imbeciles will understand what I'm about to say. Do you think that Sammy Gravano got in the car, drove to go see Paul Castellano, and sat down with him? Nope. Secondly, Russo is a high-end captain who is running Trenton, New Jersey. Why does he need Gravano to go see Paul? Because Paul only met, in every book you've ever read, every FBI file, Paul only met with captains at his home. But Sammy was special, other than being special ed, of course. No, there's no way that Sammy ever went to Paul's house on his own like that to discuss murder and mayhem with him. He wasn't even a captain. And once again, why does a high-end, well-respected captain need to go to Gravano to get to Paul? Surely Russo could have gone to see Neil and had that conversation. And the entire thing that comes out of Gravano's mouth is a fucking lie from beginning to end. And it's Sammy making himself out to be something he wasn't. And he's trying to put himself in something that he wasn't even involved in. Just on a common sense street level, it doesn't add up to what we know about Paul Castellano and how he insulated himself from everybody. That just doesn't make any sense. Here's another fucking hilarious part. Later on in his book, he literally says that Stilatano was the leader of a fringe Irish organized crime group. On page 160, it was like, oh, he was a made guy in the Gambinos. Now he's an Irish fucking organized crime guy. Which one is it? You see my point? And when Gravano was probed and debriefed by the FBI about this particular murder, he didn't know any of the details. He didn't know any of the key elements to the murder, which proved that he had any involvement. He made the whole fucking thing up. But because the FBI was looking to close cases, they just accepted his narrative, just as they did with Johnny Simone. And that's one facet I want everybody to understand. The FBI is unscrupulous in many sorts of ways. They do a lot of underhanded shit. I think everybody understands that. But look at Alan Kaiser for a second. I don't want to bring it up, but look at Alan Kaiser. He was a 17-year-old kid Gravano killed for no fucking reason. And it took, 15 years for the FBI to have the nerve to go and tell the family? And you think they're not capable of just accepting Sammy's bullshit? He's not going to go to prison for any of these murders anyway. So what's the difference? Well, we'll close this case, move right on. So let's get to Johnny Simone. Now, I don't want to get into his biography because everybody's done it. But let's straighten out the issue. According to Sammy Gravano, once again, this is all according to him. I'm not inventing this shit. According to Gravano, he was handed the murder contract of Johnny Simone, who at the time was a powerful Philadelphia captain. According to Gravano, this is important. Please, if you hear nothing else I say today, hear this. According to Gravano, this is just after Phil Testa gets murdered. Simone had apparently contacted, according to Gravano, the Gambinos about taking over, and that the family had been promised to Nicky Scarfo, and that Nicky Scarfo requested that the Gambinos remove Johnny Simone because he wanted the streets of Philadelphia to show that the Gambino crime family supported Nicky Scarfo's ascension to the throne. But there's a huge problem with that statement. You ready for this? Johnny Simone was killed in September of 1980, a year before Testa was even fucking murdered. So once again, Gravano is lying. He's just flat out lying. What do? Get back in a fucking time machine and go back and kill him before and then just invent shit? Once again, Gravano said it was just after Phil Testa got murdered that Johnny Simone contacts the Gambinos and wants them to back him. But he's lying because in September of 1980, which was a year before Testa was killed, because I believe Testa was killed in March of 81, Johnny Simone was already dead. He was already dead. Additionally, just to rebuff his bullshit even more, Nicky Scarfo was backed by Vincent Gigante through Bobby Manna, not Paul Castellano. It wasn't until John Gotti becomes boss that Nicky Scarfo became close. Even though Nicky Scarfo had relatives in the Gambino crime family, it was really the John Gotti relationship because of Atlantic City where the two grew close. However, prior to that, Paul Castellano wanted nothing to do with him. It was Vincent Gigante. It was Vinny Gigante. It was Bobby Manna, who Scarfo constantly went and saw about issues relating to his ascension to the throne and the problems within his own crime family. So if he had a beef with Bobby Simone, he's going to go to Bobby Manna. He's not going to Sammy Gravano. He's not going to Paul Castellano with that. He's going directly to Bobby Manna. Bobby Manna was basically his middleman to get the chin, not Paul Castellano. And if Simone was encroaching, if we follow Gravano's bullshit, and Johnny Keys was encroaching or wanted to try and get support to take over, why would you kill a guy over that? Why would you kill a guy just because a guy says, well, and this is on the belief that he did this after Testa was killed, which is what Gravano says, but he died before he was killed before Testa was. It's just so stupid, the things that come out of this guy's mouth. And even so, if a guy says, hey, I'd be interested in being boss, why would you kill a guy over that? And if you listen to Gravano, who's lying his ass off, on one hand, okay, yeah, sure. It makes sense if Nikki is the guy, and Simone is bumping up, and Simone is bumping up against him, and there could be a problem. So then I would kind of understand the issue, but it didn't happen that way. And what people don't know, what Gravano is not going to tell you, is that the Gambinos were in fact 100% behind backing Simone to take over Philadelphia at one point. Once again, this goes right back to Atlantic City and all of the stuff that came with it. Yes, the Gambinos were going to back him in some capacity, but this is after Angelo Bruno's demise, and this was the Genoveses and the Gambinos were going to do it, but there was a lot of moving parts because nobody knew for 100% who the hell killed Angelo Bruno, because there was a lot of rumors about who was involved, who did this, who did that. And then you got Funzy Terry and all of that nonsense. But the thing is that it would make sense if Nikki had issues, but it didn't go down that way. It didn't go down that way. 6 months after Angelo Bruno is killed, Simone gets killed. 6 months after his death. Now, this is where the subjugation comes in, because this I cannot back up with facts. This is just my opinion, and it's the only thing that makes sense to me, knowing the players involved and the family lineages and just the way the interrelationships with different crime families operate. I have long believed that the thought was, at least from maybe Paul Castellano's perspective, is that Johnny Keys Simone was somehow involved, knew, or was complicit to some extent when it came to the murder of Angelo Bruno. And that is the reality of why I think he was killed at the end of the day. Nothing more, nothing less, because there's nothing else to substantiate that he was doing anything else. If you listen to Gravano, none of it makes sense. You look at the FBI files, none of it really makes a bunch of sense, but you can at least follow sort of a trail and figure it out. But this rebuffs everything that Gravano says. But I personally think, and it's my opinion, and I could be very wrong, Gravano didn't kill him. I can tell you that for a certifiable fact. Just because of how he explained how the whole thing went down, it's just total nonsense. But I think the reality of why Johnny Keys disappeared off this planet had to do with jealousy, had to do with power. And I think that Paul Castellano truly thought maybe he knew something about that. Because believe me, the streets, you guys can pretend all day long that the streets don't gossip, the streets don't listen. Every murder that's ever committed, mob guys and fringe associates know who did it. That's just the way it runs. And so if there were multiple people involved in the murder of Angelo Bruno, then everybody knows. But you have to take out the most powerful guys if you think they know, because they're the ones that can present the problem in the crime family. But that's always been my thought process. I think the prime motivation here was just fear and holding people responsible they felt that were in enough seats of power to present a problem. However, if you listen to Sammy Gravano, he tells you that Louis Melito is the one that pulled the trigger. Louis Melito is dead. Louis Melito can't defend himself. Do you know how many murders Gravano blamed on Louis Melito? What? Most of his murders he blamed on him? But it wasn't him. It was Nicky Russo that did it. There you go. And that is going to present a bigger conspiracy. But I've often felt Paul believed that Johnny Simone was involved in the murder of Bruno. I don't think he felt that at first. I don't think he thought that at first, but I think the more people started talking, the more birds started chirping. Maybe Paul starts to think, well, maybe he did. And it really doesn't matter at the end of the day why the man was killed. It really doesn't. It doesn't matter because things happen in the streets for a million different reasons. But I can tell you, Sammy Gravano didn't have a thing to do with that. And so you might say to me, why would Gravano lie about that? Well, why does Gravano tell everybody he's got all these kinds of bodies when he only, through an FBI file, admitted to murdering one person? If you listen long enough, he murdered this one, he murdered that one, he murdered this one, he murdered. Listen, murder conspiracies, and I was the first to say this, murder conspiracies are conspiracies to commit murder. Not the murder itself, but a conspiracy. If I'm sitting in a room with R.J. Roger and Tom LaVecchia, and Tom LaVecchia says, listen, when the dude walks in here, I'm going to clip this motherfucker. And I don't say nothing, and RJ don't say nothing. Guess what? And Tom gets caught. Conspiracy to murder. That's how conspiracies work. And if you look closely at every murder or every conspiracy that pile of dog-ridden, ugly, creepy, golem-looking motherfucker has committed, he did to steal their businesses. That's just the truth. And you're going to listen. You're going to have the fanboys go, oh, look at he's talking shit about Sammy Gravano, blah, 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 blah. The guy's a scumbag. Even the biggest lowlifes in organized crime didn't do that. And they certainly don't sell drugs to children. And so, like I said, the whole thing here is his own words. Now, he can recall that infamous story about Paul Castellano and his cock pump. If you go back and you watch any of Gravano's shit, he talks for 2 hours about cock pumps. Well, I was curious as to what one looked like. So I found a guy that I knew that had one, and I got him in the men's room, and I says, hey, take your dick out. Let me see how the cock pump works. Why would you even do that? Why would you? But he said he did it. He said he did it. He remembers those fine details, but he can't remember details of a murder of a guy like Johnny Simone who, he was supposedly, he tells that great story. Oh, we was in a van and for hours and hours and hours, we waited to get word. First of all, let me explain something to you about the streets and how the streets work in case some of you just don't get it. When a guy is ordered to be murdered, you don't pick him up and sit in a fucking van in the woods for 4 fucking hours and then drive to a payphone and wait for a call. The only way guys are getting in a van to go is if it's green lit. What are you going to do? Sit on the edge of the woods jerking each other off all fucking day waiting for a payphone call? You know how many people are going to see you there? Oh, he said, oh, please, let it be a made guy that kills me. I don't buy any of it because I don't think Gravano was there. It's a whole entire story he has made up. Oh, it really hurt me to kill that guy. No, you didn't kill him. You had nothing to do with it. And once again, I'm going to go back to this point. This is 1981. Gravano's a fucking nobody. He's a nobody in the Gambino crime family. Why would Paul Castellano, of all fucking people, go, hey, you know that guy Sammy? Let's let him kill him. And it goes back to the antithesis in the beginning of what Gravano said at the beginning. Well, Nick Lusso came to me and wanted me to go sit down with Paul and figure out who needs to get killed and whacked and why, and I'm going to get... What? No. Gravano was not there. He didn't have a meeting with Paul. Come on. Get real. When are you people going to stop buying all the things that this fucking weirdo says? Listen, end of the day, was Gravano a gangster? Absolutely. But the reality is half the shit that comes out of his mouth is bullshit. It's bullshit. He has tried to inflate who he was for everybody to hear. He still thinks he's in the mob. He still thinks he's in organized crime. I don't get it. And nobody is saying that the guy wasn't a capable killer. He wasn't all of these things. Nobody's saying that. But he lies nonstop about everything. oh, John Gotti was gonna blame me for the whole thing. How? You all three were indicted for the same shit for the most part. So how's he gonna go into court? Like, just think about it for a second. How are you going to go into court as John Gotti, the face of Cosa Nostra, the public enemy number one, the head of the Gambino crime family, who was responsible, according to the feds, for killing Paul Castellano, which I believe he did. Okay, I have no problem saying that. How is he, who this investigation was all about? He had over 100 witnesses given, 100 informants given information about him. How's he going to go into federal court and say, so, Your Honor, listen, I'm John Gotti. I'm the boss of the Gambinos. I never ordered the 18 murders he committed. How are you going to even say that when there's wiretaps of him admitting to certain things? Think about when Gravano tells you that. Well, he was going to try to blame me for the whole thing. How? That's what I'd like. How is he justifiably going to be able to do that? It's just the excuse he uses to do what he did. And so there you have it. That's most of this. Like I said, 90% of it's factual. You can look it up for yourself. You can even feel free to disagree with what I just said. But there is more truth. See, and this is how you catch the guy. You catch him because he changes his story 6 different fucking times. And besides, if you really want to think about it, what the hell? What in the hell? Why in the hell would Philadelphia need the Gambino crime family to act on one of their own captains? It doesn't make sense. Just like it doesn't make sense that Sammy Gravano would drive down to Atlantic City and have orgies with him and Philly and Eddie. Doesn't make sense. Anyway, hit the like, hit the subscribe. We'll see everybody soon.
Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. I want to be a part of it. New York, New York. These vagabond shoes are longing to stray right through the very heart of it. New York, New York. I want to wake up in a city that doesn't sleep and find I'm king of the hill, top of the heap. These little town blues are melting away. I'll make a brand new start of it in old New York. If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. It's up to you, New York, New York. In a city that never sleeps and find I'm a number one, top of the list, king of the hill, a number one. These little town blues, oh, there. I'm gonna make it anywhere. It's up to you, New York.